schools for about 13 years and worked with English learners and assessment there.
Okay. I see people gathering. I'm getting several of them. I'm going to record this so that some of them that aren't able to be here. How are you doing with the virus over there?
You know, we're doing fine, actually. I think that you can maybe find some silver linings in some different things. Prior to the virus, the Department of Education had been very traditional in our approach to work environments. I think there were a couple people, probably the commissioner, one of them, who might have assumed that remote work couldn't be effective. And I think that the last 3 months have proven that to be not true. So I do anticipate a little bit more flexible work environment going forward, which I think will help. It's sometimes difficult to fill positions at the department. And, you know, if you're not required to live in Lincoln and show up at the state office building every day, I think that will expand the pool of applicants.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it may really change. I've read how it's going to impact rents and property values, because now businesses are discovering that you don't have to have everybody commute to Central Point. And so commercial property might go down, but suburban property might go up. So who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and start. I see Brittany and
it's Carly. I am using my husband's laptop, so sorry, it says Brant.
His name wasn't Brant, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go with a gallery view, so. And there's, there we go. I forgot your first name. Leposki, it's not showing up on there. Oh, I can't hear you.
You're on mute.
There you go.
Better?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I forgot your first name.
It's Kaylee, but I
Kaylee.
probably have it set up. I probably have my Zoom account set up as Mrs. Leposki, don't I?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. I'm good with misses. Anyhow, I wanted to, Allyson Olson, wanted to introduce her. She's at the Nebraska Department of Education. And I'm just we chit-chatted a minute, but I've got it on here so I don't have to worry. Sometimes if I go my commercial Zoom, they want me to give them $140 if I go over an hour. So I'm using our system here. So anyhow, why don't I let Allyson just talk about what she does for the state and her background.
Awesome. I'll jump right in. I hope I don't have to fill an hour, or you guys will all be snoozing by the time I'm done.
You have a lot of questions.
So as Glenn mentioned, my name is Allyson Olson. I work for the Nebraska Department of Education, and I am coming up on the 1-year anniversary of my tenure with the department, and it's been a great move for me. Prior to that, I spent about 13 years as a district administrator with the South Sioux City, Nebraska schools. And so did a lot of different things at the district level. I focused quite a bit on assessments as well as English learners. And so it was a really good fit when the opening came up for me at NDE, and I was just at a point where I just needed a new professional challenge. And so, as I said, I've been there about a year. Mainly I work to support districts across the state of Nebraska that have English learners. And I work quite a bit with district personnel. I love connecting with teachers. We've got 5 consortia of ESUs that support the smaller districts in their Title III. And so Title III, as you may know, is the federal grant that supports English learners. We have, if a district is large enough and has enough English learners that their minimum allocation would be about $10,000, they have the option to have their own program. For districts that are smaller than that, they're asked to join a consortium at one of the ESUs. And it's been interesting because even in just 1 year, I can see how the number of what we call low incidence districts in Nebraska is really growing. Districts that have anywhere from 1 to 10 English learners. One of the things I've been working on this week is the Title III allocation for the upcoming school year. And there are a lot of districts that have 1 English learner. And so obviously that presents some challenges. It's not realistic to expect that a district is going to create a full-blown EL program to support 1 student. And yet a big part of my job is to advocate for that student and that family and make sure that their needs are being met and work with the district to figure out how we can do that. In Nebraska, while we do have statute authority, Rule 15 is the state statute that governs English learners. There's a lot of flexibility within that rule, how districts might design a language instructional program and how they might meet the needs of English learners. So much depends on the context and the resources that districts have. So that's a big part of it. The other part that is probably just as big is ELPA 21. ELPA 21 is an assessment that the state of Nebraska is part of a 7-state consortia that we administer, and there's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens with an assessment, from assessment design. We're constantly doing validity studies, constantly doing research to meet members' needs. And so ELPA 21 is the assessment that all English learners will take in Nebraska. This year was a little bit of an exception. We had about 95% of our students that did complete testing before school started closing. So we're in a better position than many other states that closed with many, many students left untested. And so now we have to figure out how we're going to meet their needs once school resumes. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. I'm really happy to connect with you today, and I really appreciate, Glenn, the invitation. I'm wondering how I can support your classwork. I'd like to hear, so what kinds of, who's basically in the class? Are you current teachers adding endorsements? Are you pre-service teachers? So tell me a little bit about yourself, if you would. I think, do we have a fairly small group? Can we do that, Glenn?
Yeah, we could theoretically have about 18, but I knew some couldn't be here, so.
That happens.
I'll introduce myself.
Thank you.
Can I go first? Yes. My name is Kaylee, and I am the EL teacher at Hastings High. I taught Spanish for 16 years, and then I just recently switched to EL 2 years ago, and I love it. But obviously, I'm very new at it, so I'm learning a lot. I have a master's degree, but when I went into EL, then I came to UNK looking for this curriculum and instruction endorsement with an EL emphasis, because I feel like now with my new adventure in EL, it makes sense, and I'm going to learn a lot, and it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience.
I love that. I love that you jump back in to get the endorsement, and Hastings has a lot going on. I connect very frequently with some of the district personnel there. And it sounds like they've really been evaluating their programs and just constantly trying to improve. So,
yeah, yes.
Good.
It's been very good.
Who wants to go next?
Oh, I was just going to mention, I've got notes on everybody. They did a video introduction, most of them, and I've got so many. I've got a number of people that are either an English or a Spanish teacher, and they're kind of being either one way or another, they've been wedged into ESL in a small program. So they probably one of the issues, of course, is resources, and it's a small school often. So we get a real range of people that are in situations, and what kind of resources can be offered, either anything from websites to actual materials.
Right. That's certainly a great question. And I want to mention, we've been shorthanded at the department for almost 3 years. There should be 2 people in the Title III EL department, and I've been one person for the last year. My predecessor was alone for almost 2 years. So we do have a new employee starting August 4th, and I'm super excited about that to have, if you think of it as a teaching partner, that's really kind of what I think of it as. She's retiring from LPS. She spent, I think, about 30 years as an EL instructional coach, and I think she's going to be fantastic. So we do certainly get requests for instructional materials, and the truth of the matter is there's a fairly small number of publishers of really good ESL materials. In my role working for the state, I'm a little reluctant to really sort of promote a particular publisher over another. I can make suggestions if anybody's looking for any particular resource. Oftentimes what I find, the questions that I'm asked, I think a lot of times our ESL teachers just want reassurance that they're doing the right things. And that's where I think, so my new partner, her name is Ann Hubble, and I will tell you, we will dearly love, we really want to be able to get more into school buildings. It's, I can offer. My hope is that we'll have a lot of districts that are really open to that. It's not my job at NDE to come in and tell you how to run your program. My job is to support you, answer your questions, and help you design the program that will meet your needs as well as your English learners. And so the more removed I get from that, it's really hard to do it. I love to get into the buildings and see what's going on and visit. So I'm just going to say, please do keep us in mind, especially if you're in a smaller district. You might be the only ESL teacher. And I think about the value of collaboration and how sometimes you just want somebody to bounce an idea off, or you want to say, what do you think of this teaching strategy? Will it work? Have you seen it work? And I think that Ann and I can do that for you. I know we would love to do that for you. So I'm not sure, did I answer your question, Glenn? Just the kinds of things?
I've been thinking it would be nice if we had I could do it. We could have like a monthly Zoom chat, and people that are in ESL could connect. And you could connect with each other, but
yeah,
I would like to do that. And, maybe the first week of the month or something, and just have people talk for a couple of hours, come and go. Kind of like coffee house, only we don't have to distance since we already are. But
right.
But I don't know if you guys would think that's a good deal. But it would be interesting because with the district, and I have a lot of former students everywhere, and they know a lot more than I do because they've been at it for, I guess, about 18, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're all over the place. And the demands of a small program are quite different from a Grand Island or Lexington. That's going to be very formally organized. But if you're in Ainsworth, or if you're in, Franklin or someplace, and you get half a dozen students, that's quite a change. So
I love that idea. One of the other things that I really do want to introduce this year is just a monthly newsletter where, it'll have a strategy. So much of what I have focused on kind of by necessity is the compliance aspect. And we have compliance, but I'm really more interested in commitment. We do things because they're the right things to do. And yes, there is a law behind it that says we have to do these things, but I have yet to meet a Nebraska teacher that doesn't care deeply about their students, and we want to do the right things. And so, again, I think those connections, I did see it when schools first closed this spring because of the pandemic. And, so many of us were just thrust into this unknown. And the Title III consortia directors really did a nice job of just creating some opportunities, totally optional, but just to log in, ask questions, share resources, talk about what's working for you. We talked a lot about making connections with students and families, talked about how do we get over the barriers to online learning that many of our families were facing. And so it was interesting. The numbers sort of dwindled after a few weeks. And I think that told us that, teachers were kind of hitting their stride. They're figuring out what works for them. and we just didn't have as many questions. You know, I personally suspect we kind of got into survival mode as we got closer to the end of the year. Just get us to May, and then we'll see what happens. So how many of you are planning, do your districts plan to have in-person instruction starting back again in August? See a couple heads shaking? Yeah, yeah. That's good for kids. And I know that, I know districts are gonna do everything they can to keep everyone safe. It is a challenge, and it's certainly unprecedented.
I'm going to keep encouraging more questions from our panelists here. What you mentioned publishers, and you don't want to promote one, but I know Pearson's very involved in a lot of stuff. I've over the years, I've seen hundreds of book companies disappear. They were bought out by other companies. And so I'm always concerned that we got a monopoly. It seems like, you know, I've got maybe 3 or 4 that are around. But something I'm curious about is, or at least the systems or the types of textbook publishers that people use. I mean, could you throw out a few names of just what some of those are? So,
yeah. The one that comes to mind right away that I've used personally and I like a lot is Cengage, the National Geographic series. They're Reach and Edge. It's a whole program specifically designed to meet the language needs of students. Most of my experience at the district level, I worked for a pretty progressive district where we did a lot of creating our own curriculum. And I would say, even before we start looking for published resources, I would absolutely dive right into Nebraska's ELP standards and align your instruction to the standards. Those of you who have taught ELA will see the connections between those English language proficiency standards and the ELA standards. They work really well together. I think there's, certainly I think teachers deserve to have high quality instructional resources. But there's so much that can be done with that. And, you know, sometimes you're kind of you might be stuck with what you have, and you might be having to supplement and augment and things like that. And so the standards would be my starting point, just to dive into those and find out where your current resources might actually meet those standards, and then where you might need to supplement or add some additional resources. I do think that publishers are getting better about addressing the needs of diverse learners, even within core curricula, that even in a general ed math series, there are going to be sections that will support English learners. So that's the first one that comes to my mind. There's a lot of online stuff too. And I think we were seeing a lot more resources that were being shared, digital resources. If your students have devices and they have access to the internet, there are some really good things. Learning A to Z is pretty good for some early literacy things. I don't know, what all have you found that you like? Because I'm not in the classroom anymore. And so, you know, I'm not sure I always have the most current knowledge, maybe like Glenn a little bit.
At Hastings, we have that Cengage National Geographic series, and I've only been doing this 2 years, but I use Edge. Yep. And Edge has they have fundamentals, level A, level B, level C, and I found it to be very effective. I did, after I realized that the fundamentals was a little bit challenging for my newcomers, so then we also implemented the precursor to that is inside the USA. Mm-hmm. And it blends right in. And I have noticed, I'm glad that you mentioned the standards, because the language proficiency standards really fit that curriculum well. So if any of you are looking for a curriculum that, I mean, I've only been using it 2 years, but I feel like it really does meet the demands of English learners that are trying to learn.
they have an awesome rep, or at least it's maybe been a few months. Marcia Krabenhoft is their rep, and she is so good about really helping you assess what your needs are. She'll work within your budget, and then she'll make recommendations. She's not just going to try to just, hey, buy this, whether you need it or not. I don't know if you have the sentence frames book from Cengage. That's my favorite. And I think it's actually labeled your high school, so you may not. Even the second series says like through 6th grade, but you look at those sentence frames and they are scaffolded so that students at different language levels, they get more complex, and they don't stop at 6th grade. I would not hesitate to use them with high school and beyond, but that's a wonderful resource. And I can find that and share that with Leonard. If I have a break here, I can put it in the chat. Other questions or any other resources that any of you like that you'd like to just share?
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is because I think I have emailed you before about this, because I'm really I'm creating a spreadsheet that I've created a spreadsheet because I want to track my kids in the long run. We are at Hastings really trying to evaluate the program and see how effective it is being. So if a student is an emerging student for 3 years in a row, then what's the problem? Is it is it a curriculum problem? Is it a special education situation? But do you know of any other software or any other resources? Because the spreadsheet is wonderful. But it obviously took a lot of hours. It's a lot of hard data, and it's wonderful, wonderful. But is there anything already created out there that I can plug my data into and track my kids year by year so that I can see their progress very easily? Surely there's something that is AQuest based so that I know where they are falling in their proficiency level. Is there something already out there?
Great question. Okay, so at first when you were talking, I was going to suggest a commercial package. Again, I'm not endorsing this. It's one, I'm going to back up a little bit and just share an experience I had when I was at the district level. I was with South Sioux City, and we had, I want to say, about 13% English learners and quite a few former English learners. So really large numbers. I do think you get to a point pretty quickly if you're trying to track student progress by manually entering data in a spreadsheet. It's doable if you're in a small district. You get into some larger numbers and it just becomes unwieldy, because we were also trying to track quarterly grades. We wanted test scores. We wanted participation in activities. We're trying to make sure that our ELs had really the full range of experiences that they're entitled to and that they should have. So I ended up purchasing a software package called Elevation, and I really liked it. I think Skylar also uses it. Title III funds can be used for it, so that was fine. It did take a fair amount of configuration getting it set up, but what I liked about it was specifically designed by an ESL teacher. I think her dad was a database developer, and so it really met our needs. However, I'm going to now tell you about a new report that is available through NDE. You may need to work with whoever in your district does the data because it's an advisor report, but now we have a report that will show you by name, technically it's actually by SSID, but I think the names are on there too. So by district, you can see when a child first entered EL services. So the first year they took Alpha 21 would be considered their baseline year. And then each of their subsequent levels, and then whether they're on track, partially on track, or off track. And I wonder if that might be what you're looking for, because I feel like we want the information sort of at a district level, drill down and see, and then say maybe by grade level, are all of our students moving to where you can finally get down to the individual student that might not be progressing and start asking those questions. you know, we always want to say, has the student really been exposed to a high quality language instructional program? And I'll be honest with you, that is a challenge in many of our low incidence districts. You know, I'm contacted maybe a year or two after the fact because the student hasn't made a lot of progress as measured by ELPA 21 or possibly NSCAS. And sometimes just through conversation, something will come out to the effect of, well, we really don't have much of an ESL program. So then we say, well, then before we blame the student, let's back up and say, how can we support the student more effectively? So yes, there is a report in Advisor that I think districts are going to love. The other thing, if you dive into the ELPA 21 reporting feature that comes from ELPA 21, you'll notice that you get reports by grade level. It's really hard to get like the whole district or the whole building in one report. This NDE report, which was just created, I want to say like in April or May of this year, will give everybody in the district. And so that's a nice report. And I will also get you.
Oh, perfect.
So you will know.
Yeah, that would be perfect. And if that is probably sent out at the district level, I could just contact my district administrator. Like I said, I'm new to EL, and I want to track my kids. I want to see is my program effective? Are we moving kids forward?
Right.
So thank you. That I'll look into it.
And I think that's going to be a really, really nice addition when you think about the Rule 15 requirement of program evaluation. And again, I really want to emphasize what I see is teachers and administrators across the state doing the best they can with the information they have. And I was really pleased to see that NDE report, because I'll tell you, I had some conversations with the AQuest team and with the data team. And basically I was saying, I understand we collect all of this data, but it's not user friendly. We're not really sharing it in a format that needs to be shared. So I was really thrilled to see that report. It may not be perfect and it may not meet every district needs across Nebraska, but it's a great step forward. So yeah, it's an Advisor, and it's one of the student reports.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Tracy, you're recording this, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I will have to go because I have a college freshman this year, and he has a meeting at 2:30. He has to register for classes. So thank you so much for your time, Allison. And I will just watch the rest of the meeting later.
Okay.
Very good.
Good luck with that college freshman.
Thank you.
Okay. We're in the throes of deciding, I don't know what we're going to do as school. I think they're going to try face-to-face. But I think something interesting is happening is I'm wondering about, you know, the impact of the trying to go online. I know I have a lot of friends in Lexington, and, you know, trying to go online and work with ESL over there was kind of, because of poverty and access to technology, it was pretty difficult. I mean, it didn't happen for a lot of kids. Do you have any comments on any other ideas or?
Well, you know, I do agree. It certainly was challenging. I think we can all safely say it was challenging for most parents, regardless of their circumstances. You know, parents really were asked to step in and supervise learning and support learning. When you think about the inherent language challenges with our English learners, you know, most of their parents and families are not speaking English, and so really weren't in a position to help those students with their assignments. And I did see some really creative ways. I'll tell you, there is a fantastic resource that the team at UNL has put out, the ICMEE team, which is International Center for Multilingual Excellence in Education. Do you see why they use an acronym, ICMEE? They got together and put together packets, and they were, by design, they required no technology. They were shared, they're free of charge, they're still on their website, and they're grade banded. I think we have a K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. And they're really for students at emerging levels of language. There is a parent letter, and some of the packets can get a little bit long. We encourage districts to run them off and distribute them. What I liked about them was the design that went into them. They are aligned to Nebraska's ELP standards. It addresses all 4 domains of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. There are activities for each. They're also aligned to content standards in ELA, math, science, art, and PE. And so a really good resource, you know, to the extent that what's essentially a worksheet can be a good resource, but the design that went into this, I really applauded that team. They also, they focused around themes with the idea that if a family had more than one student, maybe at different grade levels, the students could still be learning together. I think we had a couple packets that were around spring, and there were a couple on there that addressed summer. And so all I can say is we can't give up. I know it's hard, and I know we're very concerned about the families that aren't responding to our efforts to reach out to them. Some of the ideas that seem to work pretty well, there are some districts that set up, if you think of sort of office hours, where maybe they would have a bilingual translator available and publish, you know, these are the hours they're available, you can call, we can help you with assignments. Sometimes there were teachers that were connecting with their students when they came to pick up meals, because we know that that's a really critical need that many of our families faced. And so there were lots and lots of places that were distributing meals. And so that might be an opportunity to connect with parents. Again, I'm not going to tell you it wasn't without challenges, because I know it was. And I think that when we do have the opportunity to get our students back in the classrooms, I think teachers are going to do what they've always done, which is assess students where they're at, and we're going to pick up instruction, and we're going to keep on going. So there'll be some loss of learning, but I also know that teachers are going to be working really hard to help students overcome those.
I've seen examples. I have a friend in Dallas area, and they're kind of concerned they're going to be teaching half. They're going to spend their evenings teaching online. They're going to spend their days teaching face-to-face with the students that do show up, which I think could almost, you know, I know it's good to, teachers are wonderful people, but, you know, working 14 hours a day might be pushing it a little bit, especially. So I'm fearing that there'll be a mix of people trying to do face-to-face and online, and, you know,
Yeah,
it's unfortunate. But until I guess there's a vaccine.
it is. And to be honest, I think it's going to take a fair amount of time even to produce a vaccine in the large enough numbers. You know, I'll tell you, I had a hope earlier this spring when school, you know, one of the things that made this spring so challenging was the lack of advance notice, you know, that just, we came to school one day, and then the next day we were told we're going to be teaching online. And I saw teachers scramble, and I saw teachers, I mean, honestly, it truly was amazing. And I'm getting goosebumps thinking about so many of the things that teachers did and the ways that they did connect. I do believe that there may still be, even yet this summer, an opportunity to take a step back and invest in some planning and preparation. And again, this is personal. I personally wonder if this optimism about we're just going to start school and get students in classrooms and things will be back to normal, if that's not causing us to miss the opportunity. Oops, I'm so sorry. I have a timer here. Just turn that off. If we might be missing an opportunity to plan that would allow online instruction to go better. And I get the optimism. Everybody wants that. I just worry about it. My background was all at the secondary level. So imagine the 100 to hundreds of students that a teacher encounters in a day. And what is the plan if somebody tests positive? How long do we quarantine? How do we keep everybody safe? But I also recognize, the situation in Omaha and Lincoln is very different than it is in many of our smaller communities. And so I personally have been pleased with, I work for the Commissioner of Education. He has expressed over and over, student and educator safety is the first priority. And I think that's the right priority. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't pretend to know. I don't have the answers. What do you think?
I've seen this, at least some report from the CDC that, and I'm thinking universities, because we're also dealing with that one of the best vectors for the virus is to get a lot of young people together. And that's, that we are going to try to do classes in a mixed version, but I'm glad we have Zoom and we have online classes, because right now I don't, I do a lot of studying of the virus itself as much as I can, and I'm telling you, it's very nasty. It's I saw something yesterday. It's kind of gross, but it was a medical, and it actually, bizarre enough, it caused a person to have a heart attack, but it wasn't in the artery of the heart. It was in the vein of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen at all. It causes blood clots in places where they're not supposed to be there. And so that was kind of scary. It's like, wait a minute, this doesn't even operate like traditional,
Well, one of the things that I've read that I think is worth paying attention to is there really are more outcomes than just either you don't get the virus or you're dead. That there really are some lingering effects that many, many people are dealing with, and some children. And teaching in a college and dealing with college age students is very different than our primary friends, so.
It's like, it's different, almost different species in a sense. I mean, how it impacts. And when people say, well, they're young, they'll be fine, but that's not true. I mean, that's, I have diabetes, so I'm really worried about it. But there are many young people with type 1 diabetes or even type 2. They're, and so, well, we're not going to solve anything here on this, but I'm just concerned, that the rush to get back to school, that we could very well see another spring on us, where, we got to go home.
Yeah.
And then I can just see interrupted education for over a year and a half or something, which is a real disaster. So
I don't think that's too far out of the realm of possibilities. And again, that's why I say, I personally believe this is the time to capitalize on some planning and some things that might make that more, it's sort of like insurance. You take it out hoping you never need it. So we invest the time in planning for things, and we hope we never need them. But if we do, we're going to be glad that we did.
I see Machiko. There she is. She's kind of cloudy there. I don't know, like the background. So
I can relate. I have challenges with my lighting and my background too. A lot of times I look like I'm in the witness protection program when I'm on a Zoom call. But
my lighting doesn't matter. It's not going to help me. That's why I got my dude shirt on. But I was wondering, I know some of you have been very quiet, so.
We haven't been letting them talk. I'm going to change that.
I want to hear Carly. What's your situation? Why don't you share that?
Well, I teach in Minden. I'm the high school Spanish teacher. And so I teach all 4 levels, but we don't have an EL program. And so when we have EL students come into our district, it kind of falls on my shoulders to, use my planning or whenever I have free time, or sometimes I even take my Spanish 4 kids and kind of incorporate it into my curriculum with them to go and teach those students. And so I am right now high school Spanish, but after the completion of this degree, I think I'm going to try to find an EL job somewhere just because of the need for it and I don't know, I like it. So
You are absolutely right. There is a need, and there are lots and lots of positions out there, just depending on your location and things like that. I'll tell you, the one thing that concerns me, my hope and my wish would be that your administration might recognize how important your collaboration with content teachers are and not leave it up to you to have to sacrifice your planning time to make that happen. It really is. And that's an ideal situation when we can, if we ever have the opportunity to co-teach, but even if we can't co-teach because of the schedule, if we can co-plan so that you could provide your language acquisition expertise to those content specialists to help make their content more accessible for our English learners, that's a win-win-win all around. And teachers do that. And I hear you say that you're doing that. So thank you. Thank you for giving up your time. I wish that the school would provide you some time to do that. And if they haven't yet, then keep asking and send them to me and I will tell them how important it is because it can't be left to chance. And honestly, if your school has English learners, you can't not have an EL program. So you're creating it as you need it, but you have one. Yeah.
I am in the same boat. Also Spanish 1 through 4. And yeah, Allyson, I spoke with you earlier about my student that that wasn't allowed back into the country when he went home for Christmas and what to do about the ELPA. So I have already found you to be a valuable resource in figuring out what I'm doing.
I try.
So this is my first year doing EL instruction. And I'm sorry if you can hear my son's TV in the background. He's supposed to be at school today, preschool, but then he has a fever, so he's home.
Here's the first lesson I learned working remotely and spending so much time on Zoom. We have to extend each other grace. We all live in environments, and yes, I can't hear your son, but go ahead. So are you able to collaborate with content teachers, and how is that supported by your district?
So it's it's really hard because obviously like the Spanish 1 through 4, I already have this year 110 students in Spanish 1 through 4. And that's all my plan time and everything is just getting that going. So then I'm like, well, when am I supposed to do this with my one ELL student? And it ended up being basically during my lunch is when I did it. I did get a little extra pay for that, which is nice, but I'm like, I really cannot spend any time working on this. So what I did was I sat down with the teachers and I said, where is he having problems? And it was all in English, but that means like English language arts. And so he was doing fine in like history and government. And he was actually at a pretty high level of English when he came in. I think he scored straight 3s when he did the screener. So he was doing pretty well. So we just kind of met to go over like, okay, well, some of the readings were pretty hard when you because he came in as a senior. He wanted to play football for a year. And so then it's more complex with nuance in literature and things like that. So we would just kind of go over that. And that's why I read what they were reading and that's all I had time to do so that we could go over it together.
Yeah.
But it wasn't systematic or anything because like, when am I going to do this?
Right.
Last minute because we didn't know we were going to have him until like, a couple days before school started. And then it's like, hey, you want to do this? Well,
he must have been at high levels if he was doing well in government and history because those classes also have a lot of language demands. But so just a couple things maybe to think about if you're in similar situations and you're putting things together. And again, I applaud you and I thank you for making that work. Sometimes macro planning can be effective, even if you could sit down, at the beginning of a quarter and say, hey, give me some big ideas you're going to be teaching this year. And here's some pretty simple ways that we can make this content a little bit more comprehensible. At the secondary level, I always really watch for classes that are more lecture-based. If we're imparting all this language on students and we know that they're not really understanding the language yet, we need to be doing more. So what visuals could we add? Non-linguistic gestures, things like that. The other thing that I think it's really important, sometimes I'm going to use the word tutoring, but maybe in that situation, it was maybe a little bit more homework help where you might be able, or somebody else on staff could work directly with the student. That would be allowable to be supported by Title III dollars. And so if you've got an English learner, well, let me rephrase. If you had English learners last year, your district does have Title III dollars this year. Again, if you're relatively small and you don't have a standalone program, that's going to the Title III consortium. But those consortium directors are pretty flexible and pretty supportive about meeting the needs. If you would reach out and say, we've got an English learner, he's going to need some tutoring. It doesn't always fall to your shoulders to be the one to do it. Typically, so Rule 15 requires that we have a certificated educator that oversees the program. So, you know, you're sort of the one responsible to make sure that the ELPA testing gets done and this and that. Does not mean you have to provide all of the instruction. As a matter of fact, paras are frequently very effectively used with English learners under the supervision of a teacher. And so if there's anything happening outside of school hours or anything that we could pay stipends for, Title III can support that if you're working to meet the needs of English learners. So usually teachers need more hours in the day. I can't create more hours in the day for you, but I can at least honor your time and say, let's pay you for the time that you're spending. So at least buy you a cup of coffee or something while you're doing it. So
That's good to know.
yeah.
And I have one more question about, so we did have 2 ELs and that now we have 1.
Mhm.
One EL we have left is also in SPED.
Okay.
And so she's receiving services through SPED, and so far, especially because we again kind of have a hodgepodge put together with what we can, hasn't been receiving services in EL. I ran the ELPA this year and sent a letter to her parents saying, you know, she still qualifies. If you want additional services beyond SPED, get in touch with me. Do I need to do anything else to make sure that she's covered?
You know, it's not that you need to do anything else. As the EL teacher, you should be working in a consultation basis with her special ed teacher, who's most likely her case manager. And it sounds like you're doing that. So Rule 15 has 2 ways to exit EL services in Nebraska. The first way, and the way that the vast majority of students exit, is by testing proficient on the ELPA 21. That's given every spring. There is a second way. It's not used as often, and I think that's appropriate. For students who are on an IEP and are also an English learner, if a team, which I typically think of the IEP team with the EL teacher involved in this, we need somebody that understands language acquisition. If that team determines that the student's primary challenge is not the English language acquisition, she can be exited from services based on that team decision. And then she would be marked in your Power School or Infinite Campus, whatever, just as your students who reach proficiency. They'd be redesignated as English fluent. A couple of things just to keep in mind with that. You know, when I would look at making that decision when I was at the district level, if I saw maybe 3 years in a row of relatively stagnant ELPA performance, we've got students who never move beyond emerging. You know, special education is such a large category, so it's really hard for me to make generalizations. But depending on the student's level of performance, you know, some students they have their needs met by their special ed case manager, their IEP, and it would be appropriate to not make, if they're not benefiting from language service, why are we going to have this student continue to take the ELPA every year? Now, I'd be a little reluctant if I see a kindergartner or a first grader in that position, in that situation, because I think sometimes kids just need time and they need exposure to a high quality language instructional program. So much depends on it. The other thing I just want to mention, it's a long time coming, but you guys are young and you've got careers ahead of you. There is an alternate ELPA 21 in development. It's got we're just coming up on year 1, I think, of a 4-year time frame. And so we recognize, so if you think about the students who take the alternate NSCAS, we have an assessment appropriate for those students. There are English learners who would qualify for an alternate assessment. Right now, we just don't have one. So what we can do, I can exempt domains. If the student has an IEP and if the IEP team determines it, then you just reach out to me and ask me to do it. It has to be done in advance of the summative test. A good example of that would be a student who's deaf. We would exempt that student from the listening domain. Obviously, they can't access the domain. Sometimes deaf students might also be exempted from speaking because their listening disability prevents them from being able to speak. And so domain exemptions is about the best thing that we can do right now. I will be glad to have the alternate ELPA, and I'm not going to tell you I'm really instrumental. I get to sit on a committee of its development, and I'm in awe of the psychometricians and the people who know more than I do. So I'm happy to be a part of it because I'm learning all the time. So that's coming.
That's good to know. So if she's going into her sophomore year and she's been in the system for a while, this last year she did 3 3s and a 5. Last year she was at 2 4s and 2 3s on the ELPA 21. So one of those scores went down and another one went up.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of where she's been. And when the reporting feature, is that live now where you can go back and look?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's going to go offline next week because August 4th, everything opens up for the upcoming school year. So I think as of July 27th, they take everything down and think of it as retooling. Now, here's what I'm going to just mention for this student. First of all, the scores sound pretty good. And I'm going to guess that taking the ELPA 21 is not terribly burdensome for that student. There are some students that putting them through that assessment, there's just no good reason to do it. Here's something that's really important to keep in mind. She's a sophomore. Students who are going to take the ACT. So 2 years ago, there was a huge shift that happened, and that was students identified as English learners now get accommodations, and they get time and a half, and they can use an approved bilingual dictionary. So at this point in time, I personally would be a little reluctant to remove that accommodation from that student. I might leave her status at least until she takes the ACT. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that would certainly be a factor I'd want the team to look at.
She's an adoptee, an international adoptee who speaks Haitian Creole. And so I don't think she has any literacy in her first language. So I don't think the bilingual dictionary would, like, not exposed to that language at all. She's been exposed to English for, I don't know, years now. So.
Okay.
So
but it may be the time and a half could be really important because if you think about it, most of our Nebraska students don't take timed tests until they get to the ACT or unless they're taking an AP exam. You know, NSCAS and MAP are all untimed. And so we tell kids, take your time, do your best work. And then they get to the ACT, it's like, you've got so many minutes to get this done. So just something to keep in mind. But you do have that option for students who also have an IEP that are an English learner. Patricia, did you have a question?
I wanted to say thank you for the information on the ELPA for the students, like the alternate one, because sometimes with special ed, they just get dinged a lot with special ed and then ELL on top of that, and they'll never graduate out of ELL because of other factors.
Yes.
My question for you though, with this alternative assessment, what if your special ed more defines, like you don't talk in your Spanish language, like more severe case,
right?
Because as it stands now, we have to, at least they have to attempt 3 questions, because I just think it's brutal. And like your newcomers, we need to know where they're at, and we're just telling them to click buttons sometimes. I mean, we don't say that, but it feels like that.
Yeah. Are you talking about the summative ELPA 21?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I can tell you about the alternate ELPA that's in development, there's been a lot of work done so far by the committee on even defining. So let's say speaking, think of the speaking domain. So we might assume that speaking is what I'm doing now. But if we really are thinking about the full spectrum of students who would take an alternate assessment, it includes using a communication device. It might be sign language. It might be whatever that student's primary mode of communication is. And so it really, the test is designed to be as inclusive as possible. And again, we recognize that there is a need. I'm kind of with you. I never want to advocate for testing a student beyond the point of frustration. That's where the flexible scheduling is very nice. And I can't tell you that it's going to make a difference in the outcomes, but it is possible with the ALPA 21 summative to begin the test. The student might answer one question. Maybe that's all you're going to get that day. You can come back another day and try to get more. Yeah.
And not trying to be mean, I've seen both sides of it, where I've seen the extreme cases, and it's only a case by case, you know, for students. So, but I just wanted to say thank you for the information. That's awesome.
I'm happy to share that information. You don't sound mean at all. I think we've all worked with a wide range of students. I liked the way that Jeremy Henninger, who's our assessment director, said one time when talking about the 1% of students who would take an alternate assessment, the range of abilities within that 1% is probably wider than the other 99% of students in Nebraska. And so it's very hard to make generalizations about that. And again, that's why I'm excited to be on the committee. I am learning so much just about all the ways that we can try to measure how they're doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
I see David's joined us.
Hi, David. I'm Allison. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I ran into some problems with my internet, so I apologize for being a little bit late.
Oh, well, not everybody could be here anyhow, so we're recording it. And now we have a star today because Allison's really knocking these questions down. So I'm so glad. I'm writing notes everywhere. So.
Well, I have to again reiterate, I really appreciate the opportunity to visit your class today, especially considering I've been working remotely by myself since March. And so I'm just happy to see other people.
Me too. You know, I just wanted to mention Patricia's cat. I think these would even be better. We go a couple hours. One day we all had dogs in a meeting. So,
yep.
So some days cats, I guess, you know, I got a friend in Lincoln that has an Australian turtle that lives in the backyard, but, you know, I don't know. It's like a whole different world. I like to visit the petting zoo and have a Zoom session together. So.
Yeah. I've got a dog in my background. She sleeps 23 out of every 24 hours. So you got to be quick if you want to catch her awake.
Is it an old dog?
She's about 11. She's just a lazy dog.
Oh my gosh. You have to get a rabbit in there.
So I jotted down a couple of notes because I wasn't quite sure if you would have questions or whatever. And I really just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank you for pursuing the ESL endorsement because it does make a difference. And I think the most important role that our ESL teachers have is one of advocacy. So we advocate for our English learners, we advocate for families, keeping your expectations high. And it's challenging, but the worst thing we can do is water down the curriculum and expect less because students need time to acquire English. In the end, that just widens the achievement gap. And I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know. How many times, so when people hear that you work with English learners, how many times are you asked, how many languages do you speak? Or how could you do that? You know,
yeah.
You know, and I always say, even if, and I like to call them 911 calls. They'll usually come in maybe at the start of the school year. I've been in education 30 some years. I've never had an English learner and now I have one. What do I do? Okay. I love those calls because what I get to say is the most important thing that you can do, create a warm, welcoming environment. Step one. And you can do that in any language. So let's first make the child know that they belong in our classroom and that you're glad that they're there. Because if you're feeling uncertain about what's going to happen next, let's magnify that by about 1,000 times in that child's mind. So just make them feel welcome. The other thing, and we talked about this a little bit, collaboration. So many of our Nebraska ESL teachers might be the only one in their district, and language is not taught in a vacuum. You have to collaborate with the content teachers, and the truth of the matter is you may have to initiate that collaboration. I would continue, and I'm more than happy to advocate for you with district administration to support you. I mean, if you can ever get a planning period in the schedule, that's gold, and hang on to that. But even if you can't, make it work when you can, and somehow work with the content teachers, just helping them making their content comprehensible, because it benefits everybody. And so I guess that's just, I just wanted to say thank you. I love that you're pursuing this. I love that you're in the classroom and advocating for our English learners, because we need you. And make connections with families. So they're the first teachers of their children, and they're the constant. You know, the child may move from teacher to teacher and grade level to grade level, but that family is the constant. And so when we can help them support their learner, their partners. That's my soapbox.
Okay. We have some more.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I haven't said much because I'm not in I'm more in an atypical classroom. This is my classroom. I teach English to Chinese kids online. And but it was interesting what you said about collaboration. One thing I feel like I'm missing when I'm teaching these kids online is that I don't get to talk to their parents. Mm-hmm. There are some platforms and stuff that you can use to speak to the parents, but there's a lot of having to get permission here and there. And so I do feel like I'm missing that. I am thankful for our Facebook groups that we have, that we can get on there and ask each other, okay, I have this problem, how do I fix this? Or, but it's been very interesting to hear all of your guys' stories and stuff. I right now I'm just taking classes to keep my teaching certificate, but with teaching these Chinese kids, I've really wanted to learn more about doing ELL in, you know, a brick and mortar classroom. So I just wanted to say, it's not that I don't want to be involved in this. It's a completely different situation when I'm in with English learners. So, but
that's really cool.
It's fun. I love it. And I laughed when you said about, people always ask me, well, yeah, so you can speak Chinese?
Yeah.
Nope, I sure can't. I'm still learning. Sometimes kids will teach me, you know, throughout the class, they'll teach me goodbye, or today a kid taught me leg. So things like that. But like you said, also, it's a lot of hands. It's a lot of making them feel welcome, and smiles and, you know, gestures. And so, and I actually have my whole table of props. So.
That's awesome. Does the time zone present a challenge?
Oh, yes. I normally have to start teaching at 5 a.m., which is more like 7 p.m. their time. So that is kind of brutal, but it's amazing once you get up and put some eye makeup on, and when that screen turns on, you just, it doesn't matter. You just push through your tiredness.
Cool experience.
It is very cool. It's been fun, but it has made me want to learn more about English learners in our country, and helping hopefully down the road when I can have my own classroom. So
I've had other students that do the same thing that Brittany's talking about. I had one that lived in Gibbon. Her dad was the superintendent there for a number of years, and she taught early in the morning. She taught students, I think, in Japan, but it's quite a I would almost call it I don't know what, an online industry. It's pretty loosey-goosey, really, but it was interesting because, and I had another student in Japan who is and over there, it's just the Wild West. There's no control. I mean, I had one guy that was working for an Australian bartender who started up a school in Japan, and it had no rhyme or reason. It was just bizarre. And so I was kind of consulting with him, and, you know, I don't claim to know very much, but it was bizarre. I mean, you know, I think the guy running the school was drunk most of the time too. So, but they just do it to make money. And so I've been thinking, wow, with the Zoom, if you're good on Zoom and you can do a Mr. Rogers or something, you could become very wealthy. There are individuals in Korea that have a huge following as teachers, and they're online, and some of them are millionaires just from talking online. It's like being Dr. Phil for ESL, you know?
I do think that there are countries where teaching as a profession somehow seems to just garner more respect than sometimes, although I really, really was appreciative of the comments that came out when physical schools closed this spring about how much people appreciated teachers. Yeah, I hope that they remember that as August rolls around.
And as we raise salaries.
Yeah.
Let's see, do we have any more questions? Anything else? This class is about advocacy, basically. I mean, we have the laws about you have to provide ESL services, but that's done in such a wide range. It's amazing. I'm sure you've seen things that could barely pass for ESL, and then you have like Lexington, where they have a machine. They built up an entire, because the demand was so great.
Right. And they have resources to support that, with staffing and funding and things like that. Yeah, I think it's a good thing that in Nebraska, Rule 15 does allow so much flexibility. And again, I have tremendous respect for our Nebraska educators. I think that people do the best they can. And, you know, yes, there are programs that probably need to be improved. It's not for lack of caring. It's usually lack of resources or lack of knowledge. And again, I'm truly sincere when I just invite all of you to please reach out if I can help at all, if my colleague Ann can help at all now or when school does start again. We love to do that. And I think that collaboration is the best approach that we can take. Please know, we're not going to come in here and criticize your program or tell you that you have to do this or you have to do that. I have had times, probably the strongest I've ever had to be with a district administrator was to say, I've explained what Rule 15 requires. I will not be advising you to break the law. Let me know how I can help you implement it. I mean, it's a sort of, I'll get questions like, do I have to give the ALPA? I really don't have time. Well, I can't tell you, you don't have to give it.
No. Yeah, I know we have a fairly hands-off approach, but it's very difficult with injustice. It's difficult for a teacher to criticize the superintendent or the principal for not doing the right thing. Puts their job in jeopardy.
Right.
And puts them in a very bad situation. But sometimes, you know, and it also depends on the kind of government we have. We don't right now have one that's particularly civil rights oriented. So, you know, you need allies and assistance. So
yes, you do.
Difficult. And also, you mentioned paras. I know places where paras are the teachers. You know.
I'm aware of that too. And, you know, again, it's not, and I've seen some very hardworking paras and their heart's in the right place. And again, I have to go back to what Rule 15 says, which is a certificated employee. And so then I'm going to just, again, try to work with that district administration to come up with a better plan. One of the things sometimes that I think is worth just being cautious of with regarding paraprofessionals, frequently they are bilingual, depending on your setting. You can overcompensate sometimes. If we are trying to teach students English, please don't hear me say sink or swim. That is not appropriate. But if all of the instruction is translated and we're constantly translating too much into the student's native language, we may be denying them the opportunity to learn English. And so we have to Those supports are more appropriate with newcomers and students at level 1, helping them get acclimated. But then, you know, we have to back off a little bit and we have to help the student learn English, which is our job.
Okay. Now, we've been at this for about an hour and 5 minutes. So does anyone, additional questions? Anybody? Chico, you've been quiet.
Well, I've joined you later, so like I was more focusing on catching up with you guys and the topic.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm recording it, so.
Oh, okay, okay. But I really, I'm not really teaching English right now, but I was very encouraged to hear that the most important thing for a teacher is to welcome them. I think that's not only for ELs, and I think for any subjects, and as a teacher, just to welcome them, because when they come to the classroom for the first time and they're very nervous about it, and I think the welcoming attitude will lower their pressure, and then that would actually I think just more effectively have them put them in an environment where they learned more effectively. I really liked it. Thank you very much for saying that.
Well, I appreciate that feedback. Again, I always think of myself as a teacher first. I've been out of the classroom for a long time, but it's always my backup plan. I loved it, and I love connecting with students.
Because it's what a release, like, when we just, go to the classroom, and then, especially when things are not doing well and the students are not learning, and then like maybe my fault, and then, start blaming yourself. However, the best thing we can always do for students for their effective learning is to welcome them, just create the environment, just stress-free learning environment. I really appreciate it. It just, just encouraged me a lot.
Oh, good, good. I've heard it said, and I think it's true, Maslow before Bloom. We must take care of their emotional needs. And certainly I think that when our students do return to our classrooms, whether that's August or whenever, many are going to have some emotional needs that are going to need to be met. Certainly some fear about being back in school, uncertainty, probably missing their friends, missing their teachers. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I don't want to take, I appreciate, Allyson, your valuable time, and I really think we should do this about every month. You won't have to be you won't have to come to all of them. We'll have different guest stars or something. I
love the idea of your monthly Zoom chat, and I'd love to.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
I'd love to collaborate and promote that with some of my contacts, and just sort of make it optional.
Well, we might talk about other teachers in other districts that you might know of to recommend to be our panelists, and
absolutely.
It's kind of like the Brady Bunch. You get them all lined up on the gallery view. So.
Well, I want to thank you all. So thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for what you're doing. And Glenn, I will follow up with an email. I mentioned a couple of resources and reports, so I'll get them in an email with links, and I'll send those to you.
Yeah, and I've got a question about a couple, but I'll just do it by email. Okay. Some sources. So I want to thank everyone for your time, and I'll record this and store it and shoot it back out. So I don't think anybody did anything difficult on here. I always am careful because I know people may tell something about their district, and I don't want them to record it and say, "Oh, my district's awful." Well, we'll do that, but on a separate channel. Okay. Well, thank you, and
thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Bye-bye. Enjoy your day.
Bye-bye. I'm still here.